Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking about the best, the most used, the most popular, the most chased after, the most sought after science champions in the game. Effectively, the best science class has to offer. Now I do believe that currently science is the second strongest class in the game. I do think that potentially mystics have overtaken them, and that also has quite a bit to do with the changes to the science top 10, because this time around we are excluding champions that are not out as 7 stars. That is not to say that these champions do not have value. In fact, many of us use plenty of these champions fairly frequently in just about every game mode. Red Guardian, Cassie Lang, Torch, Scorpion from the old list. It is, inevitable that Scorpion and Torch, for instance, have lost a lot of the ground in the game without a question of a shadow of a doubt. At the same time, they're still useful. They will still often get the job done, and you can use them just about everywhere. And 6-star rank 5 ascended champions are still viable in just about everywhere. That said, number one, 7-star rank 4s are around the corner, and that is, definitely set to change that. And number two, these lists are also largely for the chase. Which champions are the ones that you would invest your rarest resources in? Your awakening gems, your 7-star 6 stones. Which are the champions that you're going to end up giving your tier 4 alpha catalysts? All that stuff. And obviously, that exists only in the 7-star level. That is not to say you should not rank up Human Torch. I do think that Human Torch is beneficial to just about every account. If you haven't had one ranked up, it's probably still a decently good idea to do so. Similar with champion like Scorpion. Uber versatile in my mind, still just about the perfect science champion, designed with tons of versatility in his playstyle, in just about everything. So there we go. 7-star champions only. Keep in mind that this is a mixture of my own personal preference and current game trends. I do value highly Alliance War and Battlegrounds. They do affect these rankings significantly. Therefore, also defensive champions can be featured in this list. And if it is something that you personally do not value, well, I will let you know which champions are there primarily for the defense. But at the same time, I still, play this game by the idea of that if the champion does well in competitive game modes, they're just about always also going to do well in everywhere else in the game. And that largely remains true. That does not mean that there are not other champions that, let's say, are specifically great in incursions. Let's say something like Sentry. But you shouldn't waste rank up resources for incursions play. You can rank up somebody actually good in most areas of the game, and also incursions. For instance, Silk is one of the best incursions champions, and also great for Alliance War, and also great for questing, and also great for Battlegrounds, so on and so forth. Ultimately, this list features champions that are the ones that people use when losing matters. The ones that are most solid, most efficient, answer the problems that are currently being, tasked by Kabam. So, let's begin, shall we? Sorry about the cough. So, obviously, still a shout out has to be given to the champions like Human Torch, like Red Guardian, who I think, comes out as 7-star, immediately is a great champion, and would be back in the list. Human Torch, same. I still think he's very, very viable. We get 7-star Human Torch, things would burn. And then, again, Cassie Lang. I think Cassie, has been plagued by the AI issues as well, but is still, viably usable in a lot of content. I used her a lot in recent AW Showcase. I use her in Alliance Wars as well. And she can definitely put in a ton of work. So, all of the champions that were atop of this list previously, but also kind of interestingly, we're all on the downslide before now when I'm taking them out completely. Additionally, some noteworthy mentions that I didn't quite add in the list, and I was really struggling with the last 2-3 spots. And number one is Joe Fixit. Joe Fixit is great for a bunch of things, and quite few players do use him. However, he's still quite not everybody's cup of tea. You do need to be in perfect control of the fight whenever playing with Joe Fixit, knowing exactly which effects you want and playing accordingly. That is kind of really the biggest issue with Joe Fixit at times as well, where you need to really be cerebral with how you use him. Overall, I absolutely love the guy. I think he's a great buff of an old champion and can still do a ton of amazing things. And if you like Joe Fixit, you should absolutely go ahead and rank him up as well. Additionally, where do we have the baby? The Quicksilver. He's great for a lot of things, but he just does not have that mainstream appeal as well. Additionally, the fact that he does not exist in the base pool of champions as well, he was one of the champions for Mega Days, kind of limits his availability and popularity. However, there are people who are very capable with Quicksilver. He has moderate defensive value too, and obviously the prestige, so we do see him ranked up more often than he otherwise would be, purely for prestige, because those are also often players who did get him and awaken him while the Omega Days went, as in the players with the disposable funds, realistically. Then moving on to another champion that potentially could make it and might make it in the future is Jessica Jones. I actually really love Jessica Jones offensively for different piece of content too, because she does give you a great control of the fight and feels borderline immortal. At the same time, there's no question, she's 99% a defender for competitive game modes. You would hardly ever use her offensively in Alliance Wars or Battlegrounds, and that kind of shows. But she's recently released as 7-star, and we do see her about here and there. And there are some specific metas where she can be quite a bit of a problem. So, still, Jessica Jones didn't make the list, but I think she is not far off. Another champion that might be the most controversial champion that I leave out, but I personally have quite a bit of faith in, and that champion is Spider-Punk. I do think his tune-up was, quite decent-ish. It wasn't great, but increased durations do make him easier to play. And the potencies increased his damage slightly, which was one of the worrying things as well. But ultimately, I do think that just about all of his value lies in the sig ability. So this is strictly for Awakened Spider-Punk. I do think that he can do quite a lot of awesome things if you're kind of accustomed to him. He is, great for intercepting. There are times he can shine on defense as well. But ultimately, his sig ability kind of reminds me of Mr. Fantastic. And Mr. Fantastic is another champion that I think would make it back to top 10 if he came out as a 7-star, potentially. But we would see about that. So when the opponent finishes a special attack, inflict encore passive for corresponding special. While the encore is active, the opponent is 70% more likely to throw the same special attack. Max stacks 3, encore passives are removed if the opponent performs a special attack different than the active encore. And then you reduce the opponent's stack rating during that special attack for each passive, and also inflicting encore passive while encore is already active has a 50 to 100% chance to inflict personal rupture. So it effectively helps you control the fight very, very, very well and reduce opponent's attack. And combined with his own playstyle, it's just quite helpful in between his taunts, everything else. And yeah, I wish he had a bit more utility, but when you do let this guy loose, he can deliver. So I do hope we see more of this guy in the near future. So moving on, spot number 10, I'm gonna give it the Thing. Thing is making a comeback, there is no question about it. There are more and more metas where Thing does pose a threat. In addition to that, part of it is kind of the lackluster science class that is allowing him to do that. Part of it is just the nodes and the metas, and also the fact that 7-star 6 are becoming more available. So we do see more of this guy frequently. He's made it back to Alliance War defense quite frequently. He definitely makes it back to the Battlegrounds defense now and then. And obviously, if you are one of the fortunate ones that does have him at 6-200, he can be quite a cheesy option for specific matchups with extreme attack modification, as well as kind of like an unkillable or borderline unkillable incursion champion. there are, still the instances where you are looking for the specific sets of immunities that thing provides, in addition to, him being a science champion that doesn't really rely on debuffs, has the immunities, is immune to that nullifying fate seal. So I kind of wish he had like better damage and a bit more offensive use, because there's a lot of great foundation around him. Unfortunately, he just isn't an offensive powerhouse, but defensively he can always be a great stall option, as well as if you do mess up with his combo counts, he can, punish you quite badly. And due to circumstances of, previous methods and things like that, that has allowed thing to become more relevant. And you can completely disregard this if you do not care about defense at all. And you can certainly take a look at Joe Fixit or Spider-Punk or Quicksilver as a suitable replacement for spot number 10. Now, spot number 9 is going to be Void. And Void is one of those well-aged champions. I don't think he's, dominant in science class, because he isn't. He is a bit too RNG reliant. He is a bit too slow in damage department to be kind of like go-to science option these days. At the same time, there is no question in the fact that he's still used, he's still versatile, his defensive usability is kind of making comeback too, because there are quite few nodes and metas now. Kabam seems to be trendy in the form of applying debuffs to you as you are fighting him, and Void just instantly punishes for that. He's quite unique in a sense that, any debuff you get on you for any reason, and that's just automatic health loss, which obviously does have quite a bit of value in Battlegrounds. Now, offensively, again, as I said before, he does have his downsides. There are, half decent upsides too. He still has great, effect power control. He still has great regeneration control. He can be quite tanky. He does have that massive health pool, and ultimately, he can access fairly good amount of damage in medium to longer fights. Unfortunately, he is fairly slow starter that does again rely on RNG. And if you're looking at any individual thing that Void does, there are champions that do everything he does better offensively. If you need, heal reversal, there will be champions who reverse the healing much more potent and without relying on RNG than Void does. If we are looking at, ability power rate reversal, there are better champions for that too. But his kind of like package of being able to do both of those things, as well as accessing kind of like a dot, which is not counted as a dot actually, because it's kind of like a unique ability similar to Red Skull, and then having some defensive viability, we definitely do see Void around plenty still. But number 8 now I'm giving to Deathless SheHulk, and let me make this absolutely clear. I do think part of it is current hype. I do think that there is a very solid chance that half a year down the line, people rarely use her. Realistically, she is quite literally a Kabam manufactured champion upon us that had to be used. Let's face it, even Deathless Vision saw some action in that Necropolis run. But she is very, very impressive in it. So we have established that she is quite great for Everest content. What we have not had time to establish is how good she actually is. How good she is going to be in random metas. How useful her utility is, so on and so forth. There are a lot of issues I personally have with Deathless SheHulk, and what's the best way to put it? If Kabam would give original SheHulk the ramp-up mechanic of Deathless SheHulk, as in, better percentages to get the passive furies instead of trauma, as in slightly longer duration for her passive furies to match the duration that Kabam's giving for the trauma, as in ability to pause her trauma during strikers, stuff like that. If they kind of like modernized OG SheHulk's kit with the core that they use for Deathless SheHulk, OG SheHulk would be way better as champion. No, very little doubt about that. Because OG SheHulk had much better awakened ability. That debuff shrug from science class is just miles better than anything this kit has to offer. In addition to the fact that slow, easily accessible on heavy attack, in my opinion, is more useful than her fear debuff, preventing unblockable and miss. In addition to the fact that Petrify is quite literally the combination of, her level 2 Petrify is quite literally the combination of the Wither and the Spectre that is now split apart. Yes, SheHulk does have, healing mitigation with her debuffs built in, but if you want to reverse and control power, Petrify did both of those things. So ultimately, I do think she would be inferior version of the SheHulks if SheHulk had the ramp up mechanic that Deathless SheHulk has. At the same time, the game is changing. We do not know exactly the utilities that are going to be the most useful over time, and she does have a chance to retain or potentially improve her position because people do seem to be behind her. So, at the moment, I will give spot number 8 to Deathless SheHulk. I am, on a personal note, fairly skeptical where she's going to end up in 1 year's time or half year's time. But, I'll be happy if she does well. There is no question, however, currently, that Deathless SheHulk is a very popular rank up for a multitude of reasons. So let's move on to spot number 7, and that is Luke Cage. Now, another champion buff who I wasn't too hot on initially, but it definitely grew on me. And I do think it's a solid, decently good buff now. There are, again, still things that I dislike with the buffed Luke Cage, like the fact that you do have to incorporate your heavy attacks quite frequently now. And, that does kind of take you out from the rhythm of the fight, as well as the fact that they effectively did take away his stun loop. You have basically but no choice to go for level 2, and then you can get 1-2 level 1 stuns off. But now he's much more efficient at controlling opponent's power with his exhaustions. He is very potent for reducing opponent's ability accuracy, and that's quite rare for science class. He also happens to be a solid counter for Serpent, which is definitely kind of helping his case. That indestructibility is still, providing you with a safety net, which is ever so useful. And now that his damage is quite decent, he's a solid science champion. I very, very recently acquired him as 7-star, immediately took him to rank 2, and he's potentially one of my leading rank 3 candidates in science class. So yeah, I do believe that he has, his buff has aged quite well. He has a place in the game, and we have been seeing it. So next up is Titania, and this is actually a sad story. I absolutely love the science class, and I love a lot of science champions, and Titania is one of those champions that I love in theory. I know she can be great, but I kind of see a lot of pushback against her, and that's 80% down to AI. I mean, really is. I like Titania, but there's something always in me stopping me from taking her to rank 3 to begin with. It's one of those things. I see a lot of people definitely have ranked her up and use her here and there, but there's nowhere near as many people running Titania as frequently as there used to be. And if they do, they often do with significantly more mixed and varied results. And the reason for that, unfortunately, is Kabam's ineptitude. That it's no secret that several months back, something drastically changed with the AI. And albeit a lot of the things have been, made better to back where they used to be, and it's more tolerable now, Titania is still one of the biggest champions to suffer from it. And that's connected with her level 3. The entire core rotation about Titania, and kind of much of her value, was the fact that you can push opponent to 2+ bars of power if you wish, connect the first hit of your Haymaker, drop your level 3, and then you're going to be able to spam, a bunch of heavy attacks, go into Relic, and then, go into full combo into level 1, or drop another heavy attack to finish out the fight. That is, unmistakable, quintessential part of her kit. Her level 3 is extremely powerful. We all know that. Applies a crap ton of debuffs. One of those debuffs is Intimidate, which is meant to be making opponent more defensive. There's no other way to say this. At some point, opponent took that Intimidate as borderline guarantee. It was rare when opponent would throw that special 3 and throw out your damage loop. Now, you still didn't die or take damage because of the indestructible active on Titania, but previously opponents, very, very rarely activated that level 3 to the point where you could be quite confident in using Titania for that not to happen. If it did occur, you were pissed off and surprised. Then, for a while, opponent took that level 3 as a strong suggestion. When Titania threw her level 3, most of the time you were fine. Occasionally AI started activating his special attacks, ruining your damage rotation. Now, AI just doesn't care, Intimidate or not, from Titania. It's just gonna shoot. Like, I think last 15 times I used Titania's level 3. 14 of those times my opponent dropped that level 3 to my face just about immediately. I seem to be able to recall being able to finish 1 or 2 fights in the last several metas with Titania with her proper rotation. Now, obviously the results here are going to be skewed, and she does have a lot of value the way she is. You can also go for, level 2 damage, level 1 damage, which is still the inferior rotations in most cases, but, there are options. She's one of the few science champions with the stagger. There's a lot, solid stuff in her kit. No doubt about that. But currently, at the moment, I myself, and I know a ton of other people, do not have a lot of faith in Titania. She's a champion I might throw in my deck if I don't, find, a complete solid match for a current meta due to, the champions that I have ranked up or whatever I have available. But she's one of those champions, as soon as I do think I have like equally good or better option, I just kind of kick out immediately. And again, there is something quite literally in my head. It's like, I don't really want to rank 3 her because I don't trust her. And in reality, I think Titania should be a top 3 science champion. I really, really do. The buff immunity, still quite rare, tremendously useful. Debuff spam, tremendously useful, interacts with despair and inequity and things like that. Indestructible, unblockable, unstoppable, all of those things in Haymakers, great. One of the champions can tank level 3s and so on. So much good. But completely ruined by Kabam and the AI. I'm not gonna say completely, but heavily hindered. So there we go. That's where I'm at with Titania right now. I completely get it if you disagree, and I'm sure there's somebody gonna be in comments, I use Titania all the time, opponent never, throws special attacks, or she still crushes it, all the fights. I'm like, sure. That hasn't been my experience or experience of a ton of people I have been playing with and or against. So there we go. Next up, spot number 5, SheHulk. SheHulk, I think, is, doing his job fine. Previously, SheHulk was in spot number 3. I think it's not that SheHulk has gotten any less viable or valuable. I think more it's just that what he does comes with bigger caveats, and we kind of need a bit different things. I do think he has retained just about all of his value. I don't think he has, had a glow up or anything like that. There's tons of rank 3 SheHulks everywhere, and you can see them quite frequently. But at the same time, I do think that a couple of champions in science class have been outperforming him, and he doesn't quite hold up at spot number 3, which is actually something that I did talk about when I started moving SheHulk up the ranks, because he was unquestionably like a go-to science option for most of the players. Where I foresaw SheHulk coming down as soon as suitable high-end replacements become available and, more understood, and so on and so forth. And as the game moved forward, that's exactly what happened. SheHulk's still great. It's never a bad idea to rank him up. He, will do well. But he's just not a top 3 guy anymore. He doesn't do enough different things. Ultimately, he's a science nuke that spams a lot of debuffs once he gets plenty of passive furies and can stun loop the opponent. Dead. And even that, comes with some issues. For instance, for a science champion, often, for instance, currently, you would want a ton of debuffs to be applied as early as possible. Hulk can't do that up until he builds his furies. He only then starts debuffing. And then again, he has no ability power rate control. He has, the most casual interaction with despair to control the regeneration. What he does have is a ton of damage, no active buffs that could potentially, trigger some nodes, and poison immunity, plus the stun loop. But a lot of damage. That level 3 is, very fun. So he works when he works and he does well, but there are, again, more and more instances when he kind of doesn't. And he's not like that exceptionally fast for him to be staple that's kind of forced into situations where he shouldn't be. So there we go. Hulk is spot number 5 at the moment. Spot number 4 I'm going to give to Count Nefaria, the Doctor Strange wannabe. The mafioso of the game. He's very good. He just is. He is plenty annoying on defense. He has, solid defensive value as well. And then offensively, I like him too. He can mitigate opponent's healing. He can mitigate opponent's power gain. He can access, fairly solid amount of damage. And then obviously he has that auto weight, which can be tremendously helpful getting openings and getting easy, safe intercepts. Then he has his ionic overcharge, where as soon as he enters it, all of his attacks become non-contact and deal energy damage, which, lets him avoid random damage back mechanics from even skill champions. That's kind of funny thing. He's quite good in skill class as well. And, dealing energy damage at that point can switch up the match too. And it's very, very solid champion. I do think we are going to have the count problem. And he's a champion that by design at the moment is designed to never be at the top of the game. And that is because of unfazed mastery. Like, if you're talking competitive scenarios, if you're talking non-competitive scenarios, obviously there's no real downside to count. But Alliance War masteries exist, and Battlegrounds masteries exist, and those are 2 game modes that I think will ultimately kind of, keep him in check. If he is, fairly frequent champion, this might not occur to him, but if he ever becomes like dominant, like one of the best science champions, or one of the most popular champions in the game, everybody's going to be running unfazed. And that's going to make it into a lottery when you use him. Because you will still be able to use him, but number 1, it can still often catch you off guard, so you can, screw a match up that way. But number 2, it will significantly slow you down because you can't do Count Nefaria's rotation. Now, there is a bright side. There is an upside to this because his balance review is still up for grabs. We do not know. Maybe BAM is going to figure out a way how, or if they even want to, maybe, they will save him from the unfazed mastery. If they don't, though, that's always going to hang over his head, kind of as a sword of Damocles, I suppose. Or, he definitely is a champion that's just never going to be allowed to fly too close to the sun, unless Kabam does something about unfazed. So there you go. That's Count Nefaria. I think he's great. He definitely has established himself in metagame. It's just that he's like in a weird place where his presence in a metagame comes with limits. And again, if he ever gets too popular, he's going to get brought down by that one damn mastery. Right, let's move on. Spot number 3. And I think Spider-Ham. I think Spider-Ham is just about everywhere. I think anybody who plays this game competitively at serious level at this point has a rank 3 Spider-Ham and is very happy about it and is using this little piggy. The cool thing about the piggy is he can be tremendously useful on defense as well. In fact, in the previous meta, where we had Power Shield in Battlegrounds, he was primarily in people's decks because of the defense. as you know, he just screwed up his opponent's special attacks, inflicted the power stings, and made it impossible to offload your special attack before he started gaining spider nonsense. And there were, like, you know, limited amount of solid options against him. And then at the same time, he is awesome offensively. It just is. You know, we still do not have that many champions that have great power sting damage. I believe he still has just about the best overall easily accessible power sting damage in the game, or it's at the very least up there. He can finish up fights very quickly. He does it in a rare way. Very few champions mitigate or are immune to power sting damage, and that's why he's good. You know, when you use any champions, typically you always have to keep in mind how they distribute their damage, whether it's energy damage, whether it's dot, whether it's like massive lumps of burst damage, whether it's single big special attack hit. And all of those have, you know, built-in protections in the champions that you go up against. You know, a lot of champions with high energy resistance, Spider-Cam is not going to care about it. A lot of champions with physical resistance, Spider-Cam is not going to care about it. A lot of champions with, you know, damage mitigation from a single source, like, I don't know, FAM, Spider-Ham's not going to care about it. And you can do some really, really clutch fights with this little guy. And if you do get like a proper suitable matchup for him, he's going to nuke. He does have potential to finish out fights very, very quickly. When you push opponent level 2, you use your level 1 to pause your own power stings. You stack up as many as you can. And then, you know, utilize the relic. And the relic's helpful for him too. It's like one of the more compatible relics in the game. And then the result is just very, very good. So I remember when I put Spider-Ham at, you know, mid to bottom section of top 10 and people were having go at me. Last time around I put Spider-Ham as in top 5 science champions in the game. That's where he was previously, in spot number 5. And people are having go at me. And I bet people are going to have a go at me now as well when I put him in spot number 3. So, hey, come at me, I suppose. Now, spot number 2 is going to go to Silk. She's just one of the best science champions at the moment in the game. She works in just about every game mode. She can do a ton of damage. She does it very straightforward, easily. She has one of the best access to stuns and knockdowns in the game because of her, you know, heavy charge mechanic. Then again, obviously, depending on your sig level, you can use her to reverse the regeneration in combination with the rest of the debuffs. Her access to slow, you know, can stop evade and unstoppable, so there is decent amount of utility in her kit. And then her amazing evade. That evade is such a lifesaver. You can be always more aggressive. You can, you know, evade special attacks that you would otherwise have no chance of evading. And yeah, she puts in work on frequent basis. She's popular enough to be on the blacklist as one of the most dominant Alliance war attackers. Previously, she was whitelisted. She is, you know, a staple for Battlegrounds. She is arguably the best or one of the best incursion champions right now in the game. And yeah, I do think she deserves the second place spot, because I think that the best champion in science class is quite obvious, and it's Morbius. There's just no question about it. It's fucking Morbin time. Let's go. Okay, I'm kidding. I actually had Morbius at spot number 10, but I demoted him to spot number 11. But I did want to give him a shout out. We're going to talk about Morbius a bit. It's Photon. Photon is the best science champion still. Photon is criminally underrated offensively still. She is much better than people give her credit to, especially for, you know, sort of a ramp up champion. And then obviously she still presents plenty of defensive value. She's nowhere near as defensively dominant as she was when she initially came out, but that goes just about everybody now. Whether we like to admit it or not, even Serpent is nowhere near defensively scary right now as he was even, 3 to 4 months ago. And the reason for it is because he has more counters. Which I still think, is wildly different case for Serpent, because in a generic matchup, he's going to just absolutely destroy you. With Photon, it's a different case. People got better at fighting her. People got much better at parrying her specials, need be, or managing her charges. fighting, her without stunning. And the end result is that, there's a fair amount of champions that can do Photon reasonably well to very well. However, still at the same time, her interaction with an equity and her high energy resistance is making the fight slower. You potentially being forced to manage her charges is still going to work as a, delay tactic for you to wait until she's just about run out of her charges before you push her past the bar of power. There is still the mess up factor, which is extremely punishing because you do not have access to willpower to heal. And also any regeneration is going to be, heavily gimped against Photon because you'd probably be littered in debuffs and will have that Petrify passively placed on you now and then. So it's hard to regen after your mistakes too. If you do not manage her charge perfectly, there's typically some block damage involved with you having to parry the level 1. And ultimately she still has a very, very potent defensive package. In any vanilla meta, you would see Photon in just about every deck. And in any vanilla meta, you'd see players adding champions to the deck specifically because they counter Photon. Part of the reason why Mantis, for instance, gained her popularity was Photon. And she's very good offensively also. All of her damage is energy damage, so she can sometimes even take some very random skill matchups like Korg. She's not going to be the fastest, but she can do it. And then obviously her debuff spam interacts with Inequity, Despair, and her access to that passive Petrify. It's not going to be the best heal reversal, but you will shut down the healing and do some damage thanks to that. And then on top of all of that, obviously you do have access to Taunt. You do have an additional safety net of going invisible when you get parried by very, very offensive AI. And all of that, comes into play. To a point where, for instance, in Sequitur and Provocateur tactics, she was still one of the best lines for attacker without being a tactic champion. Because she just countered, unique threats like nobody's business. And that kind of happens often. So I do think that overall value as a champion, Photon provides you with more than SheHulk or Ham does. I think offensively, SheHulk is the best science champion. I think if you're purely looking at attack power, that would be SheHulk. I think if you take the full package together, I think it's Photon. Which I think is fair assessment. Lastly, obviously, Morbius still rocks. As I said, I was going to put him in spot number 10, but I think I would have got an unbelievable amount of shit for it. I really believe that he is in conversation for the spot number 10 or potentially 9. I believe he is good enough, but unfortunately not many other people believe me or would ever believe me. And, ultimately, again, he just isn't as widely used as I'd like him to be. I do also think that his future in the game is uncertain. I do think that in this last 4-month period, there's no argument that he was one of the 10 best science champions in the game for that specific period. I do think, however, we're just about past it. And we'll see what happens in Morbius. Right. Still, back to the science. Photon's the best champion. For sure. Right. So all science top 10. Photon still at the top. SheHulk number 2. Again, that SheHulk number 2 previously would have been Titania if not for AI issues. The AI issues have not gotten better, if anything worse, so Titania kind of slid down a bit. Then we have Hulk, Titania, Ham, Scorpion, Torch, kind of funny because they kind of disappeared. Quicksilver, which I think is spot number 11 now. Red Guardian, Cassie Lang, which again do not exist as 7 stars. So, new science top 10. Photon, SheHulk, Ham, Nefaria, Hulk, Titania, Luke Cage, Deathless She-Hulk. Oh, we're hyped. Void Morbius. No, I'm kidding, it's not Morbius. It's the thing. You see, I told you I was going to put him in top 10. I told you. Ha. And then champions that would likely make their turn to the top 10 should they be released as 7 stars. Torch, Scorpion, Cassie, Lang, and Red Guardian. We also obviously have Joe Fixit, Jessica Jones, Quicksilver, Spider-Punk that I think has, you know, just as solid argument as anybody. Getting in the top 10, pending your own personal, you know, opinions. But if you told me, you know, I think Joe Fixit should be in top 10, let's say spots number 9 and 10, I'd be like, yeah, sure. If you tell me that Spider-Punk should be in, let's say, top 10 of science, somewhere in the bottom half, I'd say, yeah, you're probably right. So now that leaves us only with Mystic class, which I think is the strongest class in the game right now. See you very, very soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about